Article Al-Mahdi al-Muntazar. Introduction. The Mahdi will be a righteous man, a descendant of the Prophet peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and a descendant of his grandson Al-Hazan. According to the most correct opinion, he filled the earth in his time with righteousness and justice. He ruled for 7 years or 9 years. It is confirmed that he was the greatest mujaddid reformer for this ummah at the end of time. There are many hadiths about the appearance of the Mahdi, most of which are sahih, but some are da'ifa, and some are even madhu spurious. Opinions vary as to the nature of his appearance, and when it will take place. Some of these opinions are on the side of munkar and doubtful. Others exaggerate in describing his nature and character. Still others exploit it to realize certain goals. Perhaps the phenomenon of the Mahdi is the most frequently mentioned of the signs of the last days, so much so that the bad and the good are mixed up in his story. This may be due to its association with the fitna and the battle, and another association with the virtues that the Shia regard as privileges of which they are proud. In addition, Al-Mahdi is also closely associated with the promise of salvation for this ummah, which makes some people even more eager to exploit it. These three connections strengthen the motivation to fabricate false hadiths, exaggerations and lies about this one phenomenon, so that its true teachings disappeared for many people. It is for this reason that this article is so important and urgent, and it is necessary to explain it in order to prove who is guided and who is deviating, especially regarding this phenomenon. A. The phenomenon of al-Mahdi, real or imaginary. In the phenomenon of the Mahdi, truth and falsehood, the heinous and the weighty are mixed. The lack of sufficient information and evidence to reveal the truth about him on the part of some of the scholars has led them to deny him altogether. So they consider him to be a delusion or a corrupt belief from another religion that has infiltrated the Muslims. This is contrary to the belief held by al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, who believe that a man from among the al-Bayt family of the Prophet peace and blessings of Allah be upon him will emerge at the end of time, and that it will be a time of spaciousness and justice. In order to clear up the confusion and shed light on this issue, I have deemed it necessary to state the opinions of those who deny the Mahdi, their arguments, and then refute them. Then I summarized it to explain the opinion of the majority of our scholars about the Mahdi. 1. Those who deny the phenomenon of al-Mahdi. It is well known that some scholars have totally denied the phenomenon of the Mahdi. Those who deny it in general. A. Perhaps because he thinks that what is meant by the Mahdi is Jesus, alayhi salam. B. It could be a lack of knowledge about hadith. C. It is also possible that the person concerned comes from an ancient or modern school of intellect that uses only reason to determine Sharia rulings. D. They may be among those influenced by the studies of Orientalists and their methods. E. Or perhaps the denial was triggered by a reaction to what they had witnessed, which was the mixing up of this phenomenon with a number of fictions and falsehoods. Regardless of the reason for the denial or its motivation or its cultural origin, the most appropriate course of action in this situation is to mention some of the words of those who denied it, explain their doubts, and then refute them. In order to clarify this matter, especially for the readers, I consider it necessary to divide this discussion into 2 parts, as follows. A. Influential scholars and scientists who denied the phenomenon of al-Mahdi. I convey from these figures what has been narrated from Mujahid, Al-Hazan, Al-Bashri, Ibn Khaldun, and Muhammad Rida about their denial of the phenomenon of the Mahdi. Mujahid, Al-Hazan, Al-Bashri, Roima Humala and the phenomenon of Mahdi. It was narrated from Mujahid and Al-Hazan al-Bashri that both of them were of the opinion that the Mahdi would be Jesus b. Maryam alayhim assalam. The report that was narrated from these 2 scholars is based on a daif report, so it cannot be accepted. If we assume that the report that contains the opinion of the 2 scholars is sahih, then the only reference to it is an answer issued by Ibn Mayyah, in which it is stated, There is no Mahdi except Jesus ibn Maryam. Ibn Mayyah, al-Fitan, hadith no. 4039. This hadith was reported by al-Hakim in his Mustadrak, and he commented afterwards, I mention this hadith only as a matter of amazement, not for the purpose of arguing with it. This hadith was da'ifized by al-Bayhaqi. Ad-Dahabi said about it in Mizan al-I titled, This Atzar is null and void. Ash-Shanani said, This hadith is false madhu. Other scholars who discredited this Atzar were al-Abari and al-Qurtubi. If we consider this ahadith to be sahih, then there is not a single sentence in it that denies the appearance of the Mahdi from among the descendants of the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, because many ahadith have been narrated about the nature of the Mahdi, his name and the name of his father. It is clear and obvious that the Mahdi is not Jesus, alayhi salam. This Atzar confirms that there is no Mahdi who is perfect and protected from sin masham except Isa, peace be upon him. This means that Jesus is the greatest Mahdi after the death of the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. So it is correct to say that there is no true Mahdi except Jesus, even if there are other Mahdis. Ibn Kathir said, This hadith, in the eyes of the short-sighted, contradicts the hadiths that have been narrated, which establish that the Mahdi is not Isa ibn Maryam. And that does not deny that there are others who are Mahdis as well, and Nihaya fi al-Fitan. If this is the case, then we can conclude that the narration of this opinion from Mujahid and al-Hasan al-Bashri is based on a da'if report, which raises the possibility that what is attributed to them is a lie. If we assume that this narration from them is sahih, then it is only an ijtihad that relies on a hadith that is da'if in its chain of transmission, even though the evidence presented suggests otherwise. Lunu Khaldan Roa Mahalla and the al-Mahdi phenomenon. The famous historian Ibn Khaldan is considered to be among those who denied the phenomenon of the Mahdi. He was guided in his denial by the critical method prevailing among the scholars of hadith, when he presented the hadiths about the Mahdi and said that their sanads were defective, until he came to the conclusion that they were not suitable for establishing the truth of this phenomenon. This opinion helped him when he stated his comment after discussing the hadiths, saying, This is the entire hadith narrated by the imams of the hadith experts about the condition of the Mahdi and his appearance at the end of time. This, as you can see, is not free from criticism, except for a few, and even fewer than that. He also said, if the appearance of the Mahdi is true, then there is no means to help recognize him, except that he is one of them, from among the Fatimid Cathanids in the Hijaz and others, and Allah links their hearts to follow him, until the percentages and groups of his followers are complete. Al-Makadama. This is Ibn Khaldun's opinion in outline. It is evident from this opinion that he was not 100% sure of the falsity of the phenomenon of the Mahdi. The maximum of his opinion is only that he doubts it, while taking into account that Ibn Khaldun is known to quote a lot of scholarly opinions in every opinion, both to reject it and to accept it. Ibn Khaldun's Shubhat and the rebuttal to it, we can see from Ibn Khaldun's words that what makes him hesitate is the state of the hadiths about the Mahdi, which are generally da'if, or are not free from commentary on any of the narrators. Then he relied on his opinion that the narrators who narrated the hadiths of the Mahdi were generally censured by the scholars. Madru. While the rule in Ushul al-Hadith is that censure jar takes precedence over praise, al-Jarhu Makadaman Ayla at Tadil. Rebuttal to Ibn Khaldun's Shubhat. 1. We can see from these words of Ibn Khaldun that in his view, the hadiths about the Mahdi do not survive any but a few defects. A few Sahih hadiths, according to him, are sufficient to establish the truth of this phenomenon, and there is no way of denying it. As for those hadiths that he thought were not Sahih, they have in fact been authenticated by scholars who have knowledge and narration in the field of hadith sciences. 2. Ibn Khaldun is regarded as a historian, but he was one of those who had little knowledge of the hadith. Hence his comments on the hadith of the Prophet peace and blessings of Allah be upon him are not evidence. Rather, what is worthy of being used as evidence are the words of experts in this field from among the scholars of hadith, for example, Abu Dawud, At-Tirmidhi, Al-Hakim, Al-Haythami, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, Ibn Hibban, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim, Ibn Kathir, Al-Qurtubi, As-Suyuthi, As-Sakhawi, Ahmad Sayakir, and others from among the leading scholars in the field of hadith science. They all confirmed this phenomenon. Moreover, I have not come across any study, as far as I know, by anyone who denies the phenomenon of al-Mahdi. 3. Ibn Khaldun's reliance on the rule of al-Jarhu Muqaddaman Ala at Tadil reproach takes precedence over praise without a rule is not correct. More than that, Ibn Khaldun has made a mistake in applying this rule, or misunderstanding the hadith scholars' intention. From this rule, the words of the hadith scholars cannot be applied generally, and not all jar censures against a narrator are accepted as true. There is something else that limits Maqayyad, namely, that the censure must be explained mufassir and clear so that it is easy for the researcher to study whether this is the real jar or not. If the rule of censure taking precedence over praise were to be applied absolutely, it would certainly invalidate many Sahih hadith. Ahmad Sayakir commented about Ibn Khaldun. He did not properly understand the statement of the hadith scholars about al-Jarfu Muqaddaman lat Tadil reproach takes precedence over praise. And if he had studied their statement and understood it, he would not have said what he said at all. Al-Abad said in his rebuttal to Ibn Khaldun, if there is doubt about the affairs of the Mahdi from someone who is well versed in hadith, it will still be regarded as his slip. So what if it comes from among those who convey news, who are not experts in hadith? Aqidah al-Sunnah wal Atsar fi al-Mahdi al-Muntazar. Muhammad Rashid Rida said, with regard to the contradictions in the hadiths of the Mahdi, this is an undeniable and clearly proven fact, and compromising between the reports is very difficult, and those who deny it are more numerous, and the doubt about it is quite obvious. That is why the two scholars, Al-Bukhari and Muslim, did not narrate anything about it in their Sahih books. He also said, that is why there are many differences about the name of the Mahdi, his lineage, his attributes, and his deeds. Ka'b al-Abr Ka'b, the priest, has extensive experience in embellishing these rumors with falsehoods. Tafsir el-Manar. Imam Muhammad Rashid Rida's Shubhat. From what he has just said, it is clear that Rashid Rida doubts the phenomenon of the Mahdi for the following reasons. The hadiths that speak of the Mahdi contain many crucial contradictions that are difficult to compromise with one another. Many people deny and doubt this phenomenon. The falsehood and deliberate lies in this phenomenon are very obvious, and he openly said that the lies were made up by Ka'b al-Abr radiyallahu anhu. The fact that the two sheikhs al-Bukhari and Muslim did not narrate a single hadith about the Mahdi in their two Sahih books is strong evidence that there is no Sahih hadith about this phenomenon at all on their side. This is the whole element of the Shubhat expressed by Syed Muhammad Rashid Rida. We can discuss and refute them from the following angles. The notion that the crucial contradictions among the many reports of the Mahdi's hadith have led to the rejection of the entire report is unacceptable for several reasons, among them. 1. In fact, other than Rashid Rida, those scholars who specialize in hadith and are recognized for their scholarship do not regard this contradiction as making the phenomenon of the Mahdi a fabrication. Rather, they consider the contradiction to be a contradiction in fact, which can be compromised, or at least the stronger of the two. 2. Anyone who has studied the science of hadith will find that the scholars of hadith have a very careful method of dealing with conflicting reports. That is, if it is possible to compromise on one of these contradictory reports, then they will compromise and unify them. If it is not possible to compromise, then they will look for the narration that is stronger than the other, according to the method that they have at their disposal. It is not known that any of them denied any of the evidence or narrations. If they had taken the approach of Muhammad Rida, it would have resulted in the rejection of many texts and the disappearance of the main teachings of Islam. A denial of the standard teachings, which would then result in the shaking of the method of addressing the hadith from its core. 3. Muhammad Rida considered that the number of scholars who denied the phenomenon of the Mahdi was sufficient to reject its existence.